right, I am Jessica Daw. First, with the highlights. The Private Sector Commission has nominated a well-known business executive to sit on the board that will govern how the oil revenues will be spent. A man has been shot and injured at a bar on the east bank, Demerara. And in the region, Cubans are facing fuel shortage, and reggae star Jacure has been sentenced for manslaughter in the Netherlands. And you have your latest international news coming from the BBC. Do stay tuned.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. The Private Sector Commission, PSC, has nominated well-known business executive Ramesh Dukhu to sit on the board of the Natural Resources Fund, NRF. PSC Chairman Paul Chung has confirmed that Mr. Dukhu has been nominated because he is best suited for the role.
Well, he has, I mean, you know, Mr. Dupi, he has years of experience, I mean, in different investments and many other fields. I mean, he has wide-ranging experience, he's mature.
PSC Chairman Paul Chung. The Parliamentary Appointments Committee, on which the government has a majority, has already picked former bauxite executive Dunstan Barrow. He is also former People's National Congress Reform parliamentarian. The President of Guyana can also legally appoint 3 other members of the Natural Resource Fund Board. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, Aubrey Norton, publicly urged the government to subsidize the cost of basic consumer items. He issued the call against the backdrop of rising cost of living, largely due to the war between Russia and Ukraine. He says that the items that should be subsidized should include flour, cooking oil, rice, and milk. The PNCR also wants the government to provide a market supplement to low-wage workers, expand the school feeding program to cover 2 to 3 nutritious meals a day, and increase the public assistance program. Meanwhile, Mr. Norton is urging that more food be grown and that stockpiles be established across the country. A taxi driver from Soosdijk East Bank Demerara has been shot and injured. Police say the 30-year-old man was drinking with a number of friends at a Freedom bar when a man walked up to him and shot him to his left side leg. The incident occurred on March 17, but it was only Tuesday that police issued a release. Investigators were informed that the identifiable man approached him, withdrew a silver handgun from his waist, and fired the single shot. Police are yet to arrest the assailant. The taxi driver's condition has been listed as stable. Now for the news in the region. Long lines continued to be formed at gas stations in the Cuban capital, Havana. It follows local media reports of fuel rationing in at least one province amid a biting economic crisis, which has already left food and medicine in short supply on the island. Giobel Quintero, a program coordinator of the Matanzas provincial government, told local media that rationing had begun in the province on Sunday. He, however, downplayed the problem and blamed the shortage mainly on distribution issues. Quintero said in the report that a state-owned transcript which supplies fuel to the country's gas stations, was operating only 62% of its vans due to logistical problems. News of the rationing quickly spread through the neighboring province of Havana, where the remaining fuel was picked up quickly on Sunday, leaving little petrol and diesel available at stations in Havana on Monday. Officials in Cuba have previously blamed the decades-long U.S. embargo and more recent harsh sanctions under former U.S. President Donald Trump for making foreign fuel imports to the island more difficult. Cuba's ailing fuel supply is also a result of dwindling domestic production, limited refining capacity, and reliance on ally Venezuela, which has its own production problems, according to George Pinnon, a professor and energy policy expert at the University of Texas at Austin. More in the region, reggae star Jacure was convicted of attempted manslaughter and sentenced to 6 years in prison in the Netherlands on Tuesday. The behind these prison walls singer was found not guilty of attempted murder by the court, which rejected his self-defense claim. Netherlands Public Prosecution Service told Observer Online that the 43-year-old man was sentenced to 6 years in prison with credit for time served for attempted manslaughter. His claim of self-defense was rejected by the court. Franklin Watimina, press officer of the Jacure's legal team, says he may choose to appeal the ruling in the Netherlands Court of Appeal. He was arraigned in the Netherlands court last year and spent his 43rd birthday as well as Christmas and New Year's Day behind bars. Jacure, whose name is Sakuturi Alcock, is facing attempted murder, attempted manslaughter, aggravated assault, or attempted aggravated assault. It was in relation to an alleged stabbing incident involving event promoter Ricardo Blake, also known as Papa, on October 1, 2021, at Dam Square in the city center of Amsterdam. Jacure was in Amsterdam for a performance. In Antigua, the government is facing another ultimatum as a consequence of last Tuesday's fuel hike. The Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union has joined the chorus of people and organizations objecting to the 25% increase in gas and diesel prices. The union is calling on the government to rescind its decision, not in part, but in entirety, and introduce measures that will stem the rising tide in the cost of basic food items that is destroying the already declining standard of living. Should the Prime Minister and his administration ignore this call, the union warns, then it will find other ways to use the power of its membership to put the brakes on the way these matters of state are dealt with. These other measures were not disclosed, however. The ABWU is contending that such a significant increase should not have been implemented without broad-based consultation with a range of stakeholders, including the unions. According to ABWU, this increase directly impacts the pockets of thousands of workers, and its implications and justifications should have been ventilated at the consultation table and not dictated via the airwaves. The administration is reminded that such adjustments in the cost of living directly affect the negotiations and agreements that unions have already undertaken with employers. Therefore, the ABWU considers Brown's unilateral approach as not only an attack on the well-being of the working class, but an insult to their bargaining institutions. Finally, ABW reminds the administration that it offered minimal support to the workforce throughout the pandemic. And lastly, in the region, in St. Martin, helicopter flights can no longer take off and land on yachts owned by Isle of Man firm Louvière in St. Martin's territorial waters. The head of the Aviation and Shipping Department, Head Louis Haley, says the decision has been taken in line with European Union sanctions against Russian-owned yachts. The Aviation Department's withdrawal of license has been ordered by Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport and Telecommunications, Roger Lawrence. On October 28, 2021, the minister had granted a license by ministerial order to Louvière Limited Operations Officer Alison O'Noghue to take off and land on the Russian-owned mega yachts Eclipse, Garcon, and Solaris when these were in St. Martin's territorial waters. The permit was valid until November 20, 2022. The ministerial order states that due to the situation in Ukraine, it is necessary for St. Martin to implement the new EU sanctions as a matter of urgency. The St. Martin is obliged to implement the international sanctions imposed by the United Nations and the European Union. And here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
Candler with the BBC News. The Secretary-General of NATO says the organisation will approve major increases in the forces deployed on its eastern flank at tomorrow's emergency summit on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Jens Stoltenberg said the move would strengthen NATO's forces on land, in the air and at sea.
The first step is the deployment of 4 new NATO battle groups in Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania and Slovakia. Along with our existing forces in the Baltic countries and Poland, this means that we will have 8 multinational NATO battle groups all along the eastern flank, from the Baltic to the Black Sea.
President Biden is on his way to Brussels for the summit on Thursday and for other meetings with European leaders. Inside Ukraine, people are being subjected to further hardship and violence as Russian forces try to cut off more towns to link up the territories they hold. The northern city of Chernihiv, already heavily bombarded, now faces dangerous isolation as, according to the Ukrainian ombudsman, the invaders have destroyed a bridge over the Desna River. Lyudmila Denisova said this removes a vital aid and evacuation route and cuts Chernihiv off from the capital Kyiv. A senior advisor to President Putin, Anatoly Chubais, has left his post as a Kremlin special envoy. A source close to Mr. Chubais said he'd left Russia and had no intention of returning. Steve Jackson reports.
Anatoly Chubais is the highest-profile Russian official to resign since the war in Ukraine began. He was an advisor to Mr. Putin on climate issues, but has decades of government experience behind him. Sources close to Mr. Chubais say the war in Ukraine was the reason for his departure. The Kremlin won't tolerate any criticism of the invasion from within Russia. Anatoly Chubais was seen as the main architect of the economic reforms in Russia under Boris Yeltsin, but he has another claim to fame dating back to the 1990s. He was the official who gave Vladimir Putin his first job in the Kremlin.
Poland says it's expelling 45 Russian diplomats after accusing them of espionage. The Internal Security Agency in Warsaw said the Russians had used their diplomatic status as a cover for intelligence activities against Poland and other allies. From Warsaw, here's Adam Easton.
A spokesman for Polish Special Services said one of the 45 individuals on the list is a Russian spy whose activity became known following an investigation into a Polish citizen who was suspected of spying for Russia. His activity posed a threat to Poland's security, the spokesman said. It's rare for such a large number of diplomats to be accused of spying, but Poland has taken a hard line against Russia since its invasion of Ukraine.
World News from the BBC. President Putin says Moscow will begin insisting that payments for Russian gas from unfriendly countries, as he put it, are made in rubles. He's given the Russian central bank a week to find a way of switching these payments away from other currencies. He said the freeze on Russian assets by Western countries had destroyed trust. Health officials and campaigners in Ukraine say the Russian invasion is likely to cause a leap in tuberculosis cases in the coming months. Ukraine records about 30,000 cases of tuberculosis or TB a year and has pioneered new ways of treating patients. A gunfight at the entrance to the international airport complex outside the Somali capital Mogadishu has killed at least 8 people, 5 of them foreigners. Emmanuel Agunza reports.
Somalia's police spokesman told the BBC that several people were killed and dozens injured after suspected members of the Al-Qaeda-affiliated group attempted to storm a heavily fortified section of the airport but were gunned down by security forces manning the gate. The nationalities of the killed foreigners have not been established yet. The targeted part of the airport houses an army base, UN offices and several foreign embassies. The militant group has in the past targeted government facilities, and recent months have seen a sharp increase in attacks in the capital and other parts of the country.
The United Nations says early warning systems to protect the entire world from extreme weather and climate disasters should be introduced within 5 years. The World Meteorological Organization says building more weather stations will give more notice of storms, floods and heat waves. Rescuers in China have found one of the 2 black box recorders from a passenger plane that crashed with more than 130 people on board. The box was badly damaged, and it wasn't immediately clear whether it was the cockpit voice recorder or the one tracking flight data. No survivors have been found, although the search of the wreckage continues. BBC News.
And here now is a recap of your highlights. The Private Sector Commission has nominated a well-known business executive to sit on the board that will govern how the oil revenues will be spent. A man has been shot and injured at a bar on the east bank, Demerara. And in the region, Cubans are facing a fuel shortage, and reggae star Jacure has been sentenced for manslaughter in the Netherlands. And that was your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.